this is James and I'm here with the Oracle Outlook for the week starting March 19th, 2018. This week's reading comes as a request from one of my viewers, so I'll set the story up. So Toby, who happens to share a mutual love and admiration of Lenormand with me, she watched last week's video reading and she noticed that one of the decks that I have on the shelves next to me is the Housewives Tarot, and she asked if I would be willing to use that particular deck in a future reading. So I thought to myself, well, why wait? Why don't I just do it in the next upcoming Oracle Outlook video? So this week I'm going to be working with Tarot, and specifically I'm going to be working with the Housewives Tarot. So the deck is by Paul Kepple and Jude Buffum, and it is published by Quirk books. So if you're not familiar with the Housewives Tarot, it is a kind of retro deck. It is like a throwback to the 50s, and so a lot of the imagery deals with things from that era, and you know, housewives were, I'm going to use the term lovingly, they were the domestic goddesses, right, back in the day. And so typically you'll see images where there's housewives doing things all around the house, the home, things of that nature. So kind of like if you work with the deck, if you're like kitschy 50s type of art, or if you're really into the retro, or you happen to have a thing or an affinity for that bygone era, then the Housewives Tarot is something that you might want to check out. So again, it is by Paul Kepple and Jude Buffum, and it is published by Quirk books. So I have the deck on hand. I'm going to take a few moments to shuffle the cards. And keeping with the theme of the deck, you know, I usually ask, what do we need to know for the week ahead? But I'm thinking, like, what do we need to do around our home lives this week? So I'm feeling that's good. Now I'm going to go ahead and cut the deck. And I'm going to put it together. And just as I did a few weeks ago when I worked with the Psychic Tarot for the Heart Oracle deck, I'm going to take the bottom card, and for me this is going to represent the underlying influence for the week. So I'm going to move that back so I don't mix that in with the other cards. So now that I've done that, I'm going to fan the cards out. And when I work with tarot, I usually work with 3 cards, so I'm looking for 3 cards in the fan that are getting my attention, and that's very easy this week. So I have the 3 cards, and now I'm going to take the remainder of the deck up and put it to the side. Alright, so I have the 3 cards and the underlying influence card, so that is the card we'll start with. For me, if it's kind of like the similar theme to when I'm working with playing cards and Lenormand and Gypsy Witch, things of that nature, this would be like the middle card. So this would be something that we might want to consider as a focus or an intention for the week ahead. So let's take a look at the card. Okay. So here we have the King of Pentacles. So the King of Pentacles is what's known as a court card or a face card. So here we have the possibility of something having to do with a man. Kings usually represent men. And so this one could be one who deals with money. So here we have that theme. We took a few weeks off with it, but here we have that theme that was taking place at the top of the year and a few weeks coming into the year, where we were being asked and encouraged to take a look at our finances, our financial picture, you know, things of that nature. So Pentacles, it rules that aspect of our lives. So it rules our financial sector, if you will, because I tend to look at the King of Pentacles as somebody who works in the financial industry or the financial sector. So in the financial sector of our own personal lives, we may be encouraged to consider ways that we can manage our money, because I tend to look at the King of Pentacles as somebody who works in money management. Or what can we do to master our finances this week, because kings represent mastery. So it could just be saying too, on some level, what is it that we need to do to either manage or get a better handle on or master our finances. So that could be just taking a look at, again, cash flow. I've talked about this before. Cash flow, the money that comes in, goes out, things of that nature. You know, we are getting closer to tax day here in the United States. We have like a month left at the time that I'm filming this video. We have like a month left to get taxes done. So it could just be saying to, what do we need to get in order in terms of our finances. So that's the chief thing that I would look at with the King of Pentacles. Now, for me, the King of Pentacles can also rule entrepreneurship. So somebody may be thinking in terms of, you know, maybe increasing cash flow, maybe doing something on their own, or maybe there's something going on where there's a transitional phase taking place with that. Like maybe you were an employee or even a manager somewhere in the corporate world, and maybe you're making a shift to maybe working on doing your own thing. What do you need to do, or how do you need to have your finances in order that would allow you to make that transition? So that's just another way of looking at the King of Pentacles. So I'm taking a step back and asking myself, what else do I need to say about this card? So I'm looking at the image on the card. So there's a man who's lounging. So for me, it makes me think of this idea about like king for a day. So how can you treat yourself as if you're king for a day? You know, it could be saying too, like maybe there's a particular gentleman or man who's working extremely hard and maybe to make money, but maybe at the expense of his physical well-being. That's another aspect of Pentacles. Pentacles can represent our physical well-being. So it could just be urging this particular person, if this resonates with you, to consider the idea of like taking a day off. What would you be willing to do so you can have some time off? So that's how I'm looking at the King of Pentacles as the underlying influence. So now let's take a look at the card that's opening the line up this week. I had a feeling this card was going to show up. Okay, so here we have the Death card. So the first thing that I want to say is that the Death card is a major arcana card. So major arcana cards carry more weight in a reading when they show up for me because they highlight important issues and important events. So I want to go first thing with this card. That person that I talked about making a transition, maybe from the corporate working world and maybe doing your own thing. The Death card highlights transitions. So that could be, again, emphasizing this idea of maybe ending one chapter of your life in your working sense and what you did to create money or create wealth in your life. And you're making the transition from one state to the next state. So it could be saying too, again, what do you need to do to maybe make that transition go much smoother or easier than maybe you're imagining. Maybe you're thinking it's going to be challenging or difficult. But this card is asking you, what can you do? If that's the case, if you're having the prevailing thought like this could be a challenge, what do you need to either know or do to make the transition smoother and easier? That's the first thing. The other thing, going with transitions, if somebody's making some kind of change, because it's the other emphasis of the Death card. The Death card always highlights change. So if you are undergoing or embarking on some process of change, this card is coming up as the first card is about what would you be willing to do that would allow you to let go of the past, right? Because in order to embrace something new, you have to be willing to let go of the past. And especially those aspects of the past that are no longer serving you, that are no longer supporting you, right? So the Death card could just be suggesting that it's about time, as if you're in this state of creating change in your life, it's about letting go of the parts of the past that are no longer serving you and supporting you, right? The other thing, since I talked about that, I'm looking at the image and I'm seeing a mayonnaise container, and it says salmonella, and it says everything expires, right? So this is about things that have expired. So if you're moving through this stage or this phase in life, something has reached its expiration, and it's important that you are willing to let it go, because if you were to hold on to it, this mayonnaise that has salmonella in it, this is no good, right? It would not serve and support you. It would not be in your best and highest good, right? So it would be in your best interest to let it go because of what it could create for you being in the space of resistance and holding on to it. So that is death. And so death just represents, if I had to put it in a nutshell, some aspect of your life is coming to an end, and it is time for you to move on. And part of the process of moving on is to be willing to let that part that has, to some degree, died, to let it go. So that is death. Oh, one other thing that I'm saying is because I talked about this idea with the King of Pentacles ruling money and money management and somebody who works with finances, sometimes death can come up when somebody may be contemplating a move. because I sometimes see this as a geographic change in location. If that fits with you, then the underlying influence of the King of Pentacles suggests two things. Number one, what do you need to do in terms of getting your finances in order that would allow you to make the move? Number two is if you are looking into real estate of any kind, then that's what the King of Pentacles is asking you to consider. You know, and for me, it would be like looking at maybe real estate or property that is within your financial means. So that's how I would look at the additional message of death as a move. All right, so now let's take a look at the middle card. So the middle card is, I had a feeling this card was going to show up too. So here we have the Ace of Wands. So the Ace of Wands, first thing for me, can represent new work, because I tend to look at the Suit of Wands as work or business. So in going back to the person who may be making a change with their job or their employment, or becoming an entrepreneur after a period of being employed by someone else. So whatever that is, the Ace of Wands is quite clear. It's about you moving into that space or moving into this next stage or chapter in your life with a great deal of passion and enthusiasm. That's the go-to with the Ace of Wands for me, passion and enthusiasm. So there's that to consider. But this card could suggest new work coming in, something of a creative nature. So it could even be like the person is a creative entrepreneur, right? So you may be an entrepreneur and your framework for your business is something having to do with creativity. So there is that. The other thing that I want to say, if we're talking about somebody moving through a certain stage or chapter in their life, something that came to an end with the Death card, then the Ace of Wands is all about you getting your sense of passion for life back. It could be this could be saying to, like, there's some aspect of yourself that maybe you feel had died. You know, maybe some way that you used to identify yourself, something of that nature, because it just represents some aspect of not living life to the fullest is the best way that I could put this. Then the Ace of Wands is coming in to say, you know, this is about you getting your mojo back or your groove back. When I see the Ace of Wands, I always think of the movie How Stella Got Her Groove Back. So for someone, this is literally about you getting your groove back. And I'm dating myself, so I just had a birthday, so you know, I'm probably much older than a lot of you watching this video. But I hear an old disco song in my head with this card, and yes, I did say disco. And the song is Relight My Fire. So it's kind of a similar thing. Somebody is getting their passion for something reignited with this card, right? And it may be even with the Death card, you thought that you let that go and it was never coming back, and life is saying, surprise, guess what? It's coming back in a new and different way. The only other thing that I want to say with the Ace of Wands, because I talked about being a creative entrepreneur, sometimes I see this around writing. So somebody may be a writer, somebody may have written a project that kind of may be stalled, going back to the Death card. And when this card comes up, it's about taking that manuscript or that writing project off the shelf, because I'm looking at the feather duster in the hand, and dusting it off. So it's literally like something that we let sit on the shelf, going back to the Death card, something that we let sit on the shelf, it's time to take it off the shelf. And because we may have thought it expired, it ran past its shelf life, but there's still life in it, right? And so it's asking you to come back to it. So that's how I would look at the Ace of Wands. Now, rounding things out, our last card is the Three of Pentacles. I thought about this card too. So I love that. I had a feeling about all the cards on the table, with the exception of the King of Pentacles. I'm going to be honest, I didn't see that one. But I did see this one. So the Three of Pentacles, again, the prevailing message is for that person who is contemplating doing their own thing, because I sometimes see the Three of Pentacles as a self-employment card. So there is something for someone about moving into self-employment. Now, when this card shows up, there's a couple of highlights with that idea of self-employment. Number one, this card is saying, consider what it is that you have acquired in terms of knowledge and education, because I sometimes see this as somebody who has a master's degree. Get that, King of Pentacles, right? King represents mastery. So somebody who has a master's degree in something, or some sort of certification in something. It's about you taking that and building on that, because the image has a woman who has a hammer for one hand and a screwdriver for another hand, and she's actually building the shelf that the pentacles are resting on. So this is about like creating a platform or being known for something, and now you're being asked to build on that. You're being asked to capitalize on that, right? But it's about your former education. And so if it's not education in the literal sense, like you have the paper that says I went through this course or certification program, then it's about the knowledge that you have accumulated, right, and building on that. The other thing with this card could suggest that it's going to be a gradual progress type of thing. So it's just knowing that it takes time to build a business. So, you know, it could be maybe there's a need for balance between the person who's in the working world and wanting to work on their own. It may be, again, the transition. You may not be able to leave one thing full on and jump into the next thing entirely. It may be you're going to have to consider what kind of transitional phase would you be willing to make that's going to allow you to move from one to the other. It may be like you just can't just leave one thing and move into the next. You may have to do it gradually. So what would you be willing to do on a more gradual note? What would be the first step you could take in that transitional journey? Because this card is asking you to consider that. And the reason why I'm saying that is to say this. In the traditional tarot, the Three of Pentacles has a man who's an artisan, and then underneath him, because he's on a bench, and underneath him, or on a lower level than him, are two figures who are holding blueprints. So for me, that symbolically represents having a plan. So this is the week about what's the plan, and what's the one thing that you can do this week to start implementing your plan. So I'm seeing that. And on that note, I will go ahead and end and round out this week's Oracle Outlook. So I'm James Mitchell, and as I close, I'd like to thank you for sharing space here with me for this week's reading, and I look forward to sharing the same space with you again in our next video reading together. So until then, I'm hoping that you have a wonderful day, and I'm hoping that you have a tarot-tastic week. Take care.